So are you wanting to learn Webflow, but you feel a little overwhelmed? Well, don't worry, because in this video, I'm going to show you how to go from a complete Webflow beginner to a super confident Webflow user who can build websites just like you're seeing on the screen now. Hey, my name is Michael Groff. I am the founder of Fitter Media, and we've helped thousands of people become really confident with Webflow and build some pretty amazing things. So it doesn't matter if you're just trying to learn Webflow for the company you work for, or you're a freelancer that's going to want to sell your services. This video is going to have everything you need to get started. Now, Webflow is a super powerful tool that allows you to build websites without having to code. However, because it is such a robust and powerful platform, it can be a little bit confusing to get started because there is a little bit of a learning curve. But don't worry, I'm going to break everything down for you in a super easy to understand way. Also, if you have any questions after watching this video or you just can't understand something, I do Webflow consulting. It's one of the services we offer at Fitter Media. So if you want, you can hop on a 1-hour call with me, ask any questions you have, and I'll be able to answer them for you. We can even dive into Webflow and do some builds live to help you out. So if that interests you, there will be a link in the description where you can schedule a consulting call with myself. But until next time, if you have any questions or any comments, comment those down below and we'll try our best to get back with you. Over the next few minutes, we will cover the basics of Webflow, including how to create a project, a quick tour of the designer, creating our first page, which is going to be a style guide, adding elements to our new page, and then finally taking what we learned to start building out a home page following a Figma design. And this Figma design will be linked in the description below. You can get it 100% for free and you can follow along with this video. So without any further ado, let's get started. So when you create a Webflow account, it's pretty straightforward. I'm not going to walk you through that. They have a really good onboarding form that you will walk through the process. Once you create an account, you will be in your dashboard right here. I am technically in a folder, but it is going to look pretty much the exact same. You're going to see this blue button over here, new site. We're going to click on that and it is going to launch our process for creating a new site. You can start with a blank slate right here, or there are some free templates right here. If you ever purchased any templates, they will show right here. So you can create a new site based off one of your templates that you purchased. And if you scroll down, we have some templates that you can, some more templates down here that you can buy as well. But right now we are going to select a blank template. We are just going to keep the title something random that it auto created. And here we are in our brand new Webflow project. So I'm going to quickly add our assets for the Figma design we're going to be building. If you want to grab that, there's a link in the description where you can grab that. But I'll be right back. Okay, I just added the assets and I'm going to show you where I did that. But first, let's quickly go over a little tour of the designer. So over here on our left-hand side, we have the add panel. This has all the elements that we can use. We have components. This is where you can create reusable components like navigation bars, footers, call to action sections, pretty much anything you want to reuse over and over again. We have our navigator. So this shows all the elements on our canvas right here. So if I were to drop in a heading, you can see we have one heading. It automatically opened the navigator and you can see we have one heading. From there we have our pages panel. So this shows all of our pages. If we set up CMS collections, it will also show here. If you have e-commerce pages, those pages will show here. And if you have user pages, those will show here. Next, we have our CMS collections. We're going to briefly run through this at the end of the video. This is where we can create things like blogs, things like that. Then we have Webflow Logic. That is kind of like Webflow's version of Zapier. It's in beta right now. Not everyone has it. I'm not going to be going into this in this video, but that's what that is. Then we have Webflow Users. Again, I'm not going to be going into this in this video. It's also in beta, but this is where you can turn your Webflow site into a membership website. And then we have Webflow e-commerce. Again, I'm not going to be tackling that in this video, but this is where you would set up Webflow e-commerce. From there, we have our asset panel. That is where I dropped in the assets we're going to be using. If you want to drop in an asset, it's super simple. You just drag and drop files from your computer over here. And then we have settings panel. This is pretty straight. There's not much stuff here. We just have search, general settings, which there's just two. And then we have our website backups. You can restore a backup directly from here, or you can also manually save a backup directly from here. Underneath this, don't worry about these final two. These are just two Chrome extensions I have installed at the moment. Those won't show in your designer. So I'm going to remove this heading. And now we're going to go into how to create our very first page. So when you create a new project, you're going to already have a home page, but we are going to create a new page. This could be any page you want. However, for this tutorial, we are going to create a style guide. So I'm going to click this new page button up here in the corner. And then I'm simply going to type this, name this, style guide. Click on create. Now, before we hit create, I'm going to walk you through what we have down here. So if you do turn your website into a membership site, you are going to have access controls down here. But right here is our SEO settings. This is where we can customize how our page looks in Google search results, or really any search result. If we go down, we have our open graph settings. So this basically means when you share this page to social media, that little image preview that you see, you can customize that from here. Usually I just set this same as SEO title tag. So use your SEO settings and make that all the settings for your open graph settings. And then you can paste in your open graph image URL. This is the image that will show. From here, we have some site search settings that I never really play with, to be honest. And then down here at the very bottom, we have some custom code sections. We're not going to be diving into that in this video, but if you do need to paste a script or something, that's where you would do it. So we are going to hit create page, or I should say normally we would hit create page. However, since this page is a style guide, we don't want it to be publicly visible on our main site. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this drop down icon and we're going to save this page as a draft. What that means is we can add elements to this page, we can create styles and things like that. However, somebody won't be able to view the page live on our site, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. So what we're going to do with our style guide is we are going to drop in a lot of elements that we're going to be using, and we're going to be creating global styles so that we don't have to restyle all these elements over. So what I mean is, for example, let's go to our Figma file. This is the Figma file that we will be working on. And things that need to be styled, but that don't have to be styled like every single time we drop them into the canvas, is things like headings and text and buttons. We don't want to have to, every time we drop in a button into our website, we have to style it all over again. And the same thing with our headings. Every time we drop a heading into the page, we don't want to have to like reset the font color and font size and things like that. So we're going to style all these globally, and you can actually do that in Webflow through a thing that's called HTML tags. So what I'm going to do is I am going to drop in a heading, and then if I click on the settings icon, you can see we have 6 H1 headings. This is basically used for SEO structure. If you don't know what that is, just Google SEO heading structure or correct SEO heading structure, and you'll become familiar with what these terms mean. But I'm going to paste 6 of these in here. And then we're going to set each one to, we're going to go from 1 to 6. So this one's already set to H1. We're going to set this to H2. This one's going to be set to H3. This one's going to be set to H4, all the way down to 6. And then if I click the H1 and come over here to our style selector, this is where we can enter in classes. And I'll tell you a little bit more about classes here in a second when we get to our buttons. But you can see right here, I have this thing called an HTML tag. Basically how that works, if I select this, all H1 headings will now inherit all the designs that we make for this. So for example, if I change the font to this font right here, and then I go back into our add panel and I drop in a random H1 heading, you can see it automatically applied that font because we added the font to all H1 headings. Why this is really powerful is, say down the road you want to change all the font sizes for your H1 headings. All you have to do is go to our style selector, click all H1 headings, and then change the font, and you can see it's changing the font for all of the H1 headings, which is really powerful. Now also, here is a little bit of a faster way to do this. So I'm going to drop in a paragraph as well, because we can do the same thing with paragraphs. We can do all paragraphs. However, if you're building a pretty simple site and your headings and paragraphs are all going to have the same font, what you can do is on our body, up here in the navigator, you want to select that, go to our style selector, select all body. This basically means all the canvases on every single page. We can set the font for all of our paragraphs, all of our headings, all at the same time using the body tag. So you can see I'm setting all the fonts to the exact same font, except for this one because I have it overrode with the H1 headings. So I'm just going to remove the style. And now if we go back to the body, you can see they're all changing. So I'm going to change it to change one. If we go back to our home page, some random page, I'm going to drop in a heading, and you can see it automatically applied that style because we set all the bodies on every page to have that font. So let's go back to our style guide, and we are going to make the font that we have in our style guide. Oh, I mean, not our style guide, our Figma file. So our headings are space grotesque medium, and then our paragraphs are inter regular. So let's go back to Webflow, and by default, Webflow doesn't have those fonts that we need. You can see these are all the fonts that we have. However, Webflow does have, we can integrate any Google font we want, and both of those fonts are Google fonts. So we're going to click on Add Fonts right here. And you can also get that by going to your site settings. So let me go back to our dashboard. So we have our dashboard right here, and this is where our site is. We can easily get into our website settings by clicking these three lines, clicking on settings, and then that will take us, we can go to fonts. So that is where it took us. From here, if we scroll down, Google Fonts is already integrated with Webflow. So we can select a Google font, and what we need is space grotesque. So they really need to integrate a search bar, but we're just going to go down to where it says S. Okay, so I found space grotesque, and we needed, let's go back to our Figma file. We needed medium, so that would probably be 600. So we're only going to import 600. We're going to add font, and then we're going to find Enter. So we're going to go down to I. Okay, so we found Enter, and all we need is the regular. So we're going to add that one as well. And you can see we now have two fonts added, Space Grotesque and Enter. We're going to jump back into our designer, and then we're going to go straight back to our style guide. And then from here, we can set these styles. So we are using two separate fonts, so we cannot set the font using the body and then just use the same font for everything. We can set the font for the body and make the body font Enter so that it sets all the fonts, so links, everything like that will have Enter. And then what we'll do is we'll just go down one by one and we'll override that style for each individual heading. So what you're going to do is for your heading 1, we're going to select all H1 headings, and we're going to make the heading Space Grotesque. And then we are basically going to do this just for every single heading. So click the heading, go to Style Selector, hit all headings, and then we are going to change every single one. Okay, I just finished up making that style change for all of the headings. Now our base styles for our typography is all set. So if we go back to our Figma file, you can see we now have buttons. So we have these two buttons. So let's style these buttons really quickly. So let's go to our add panel, and we are going to drop in a button. And then from here, we are going to create a class. So a class is kind of like an HTML tag where the styles are saved to that specific class. About the only thing that's different is classes, we can create custom classes. So they're not built into HTML. So if I click on this button and go to this style selector. We're going to call this one button primary, or you can call it blue button or whatever you want. And then from here, we are going to style the button. So it's black background and it is space grotesque for the font. And then we have a little bit of padding on each side and top and bottom. So let's click our button over here. Let's scroll down in our style panel and we're going to change the background color to black. And then from here, we are going to change our font to space grotesque. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of padding on top and a little bit of padding to the sides. Now you can get a little bit more precise with this. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it right now. And then our button has 4 pixels radius. So we're going to click the button. Radius just means the rounded corners. Down here under radius, we're just going to put in 4 pixels. And there we go. Our first button is done. And since it is tied to this class, button primary, if I, let's say, go to the home page and I want to add a button, we don't have to go through and restyle this all manually. All we have to do is select our button, go to our style selector and type in button, and you will see it will show up as button primary. Select that, and it automatically applies these styles, which means if I change the background color to, let's say, blue, and then I go back to our style guide, you're going to see it changed the styles for all of the buttons. So classes are really powerful, and I would highly recommend you using them in your builds. It'll make you so much more efficient. So we're going to change this button back to black really quickly. Then we're going to style the second one. So we're just going to copy and paste this, and then we are going to remove this class, and we're going to call this button second. And this button has a blue outline, so we're basically just going to copy the color. We're going to come over here in our style panel. We're going to add an outline, so a border. We're going to make the width 2 pixels. We're going to make the width color blue. And then for our background color, we are just going to make this transparent. So we're going to click on this little transparent button. And then our text is black. So we're going to change this to black. And then we're going to make the font space grotesque. And then we are going to add our padding. And then on each side, we have 30 padding. And then we have 4 pixels radius. So now we have our typography all set and we have our button styles all set. Now let's get into actually building out the home page. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our home page. We're going to remove this button. And now we can begin to actually build our home page. So you can see we have this navigation bar. Well, it's super simple. Let's jump back into Webflow. Also, as we get into this video, if at any point along the way you have trouble grasping something or you just have questions that you need answered, I do offer Webflow Consulting. That's a service that we offer under Fitter Media. So you can schedule a 1-hour call with myself. We'll go over, answer all of your questions, and we can even dive into Webflow and I can show you how things work. If you're interested in that, there will be links in the description where you can schedule one of those calls. So we're going to start by adding a navigation bar first, and lucky for us, Webflow already has one that's pre-built. So if we go to our add panel, scroll down, we have this nav bar. We're going to drop that in. And then if we open this up in our navigator, you can see we have a nav bar, we have a container, and then we have our brand, which is where our logo would be. We have our navigation menu. That's where our links and buttons go. And then we have a menu button, and you can only see that on tablet down. And that is the little nav button right here. Now, one thing with Webflow's default nav bar is a little bit harder to work with. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap out this container with our very own div. And a div is just an element that you can wrap other elements into. So within this nav bar, I'm going to add a div. So I'm just going to do Command E or Control E if you're on Windows. I'm going to select a div. And then I'm the width of this nav bar right here. Let's see. So So I can't really see the width, I guess, but we'll just kind of eyeball it. So we will do, so the width will be 100%. And then we are going to set a max width to 1440 pixels. Let's do 1080. Now let's stick with 1440. And then from here, we are just going to add some padding on each side. So let's do about 32 pixels of padding. And then from here, we are going to turn this div. We're first going to rename the class. We're going to call it nav container. And then we're going to turn this div into a grid. So we're going to select this grid option right here. And then down here, we are going to delete a row. And that's it. We can click out of that. Now what we want to do is we want to transfer our items from the original nav container into our new container. So what we're going to do is within our nav container, we're going to drop in 2 more divs just so that they take up each space. And then from there, we can drop as many elements as we want into the grid, because normally it's 1 element per grid spot. So if you want to drop in more elements, you have to add a div first so that you can drop elements into that div. So we're just going to drag our brand down here to our first div block, and then we're going to drag our nav menu down to the second div block. Oh, sorry. So that error you're getting is you have to drag the nav container, our new nav container, inside of the nav bar. Now we can drag our nav menu into our new container and into our div block. Then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to drag our menu button into the div that is holding our nav menu. And then this container, we can just delete it. And the reason we did that is I'm going to add a logo here. So inside of our brand link, I'm going to add an image. I'm going to choose our logo. I'm going to name this logo. And then I'm going to set the width to 30 pixels. And you can see we have this alignment issue. But since we use this div, we can easily select our nav container and we can select this alignment button and it will nicely align it. And it's just a little bit harder to do with how Webflow natively sets up that container, that other container. So from here, let's go back to our Figma file and we have 4 nav links and a button. So what we're going to do is within our nav menu, we are going to add a button. So we're just going to Command E, Control E, and we are going to hit a button. What we're going to do is we are going to call this button secondary because we already created that button already. And then we are going to say get started. And then we need a few more links right here. So I'm just going to copy and paste or right click duplicate. And then from here, I'm going to enter in the text for these links. Okay, so I finished entering in the text. Now you can see the alignment is still off. So what we're going to do is we are going to select the nav menu. We're going to give this class, a class name. We're going to call it just nav menu. And then we're going to display flex. And then again, what we did with the nav container is we are going to align it to the center. And there we go. Now, what's really cool is we have this gap function. So say you wanted to increase the spacing between all these elements. You don't have to go down through each one and add margin individually. All you have to do is with your nav menu selected, all you have to do is drag the gap and it will put gap between all of the elements. So that is super cool. Next thing we want to do is we want to remove this gray background color. So we're just going to select the nav bar, give it a class, nav, and then we are going to remove the background color. We're just going to make it white. And then we are going to add a little top and bottom padding. And then the final thing is we want to create this as a component so that we can reuse it on other pages. So we are going to hit create component up here. We're going to call this nav and hit enter. And now it turned green. That means this is a component. So what we can do is if we go to our style guide page, we can go to our components tab, drag in our nav, and it is completely pre-built already. Now, what is different from a nav versus classes is if we were to delete this nav link, that isn't a style change, that is like a content or element change, and that wouldn't work with classes. However, with components, it does work. If I go back to our homepage, you can see that nav link is now removed. So this means you can make bulk changes to your navigation bar, your footer, or really any element you want to make bulk changes like this to. All you have to do is make it a component, and it becomes really easy. Okay, so the next step in the Figma file is we need to build our hero section. We're going to start with the text. So all we're going to do is going to go back to our page. We are going to drop in a section. We're going to call this section hero or header, whatever you prefer. And then we are going to drop in a container. So we are going to pick that container. We're just going to call this container. And then we are going to set the max width of this container to 1440p. And then we are going to set the left and right padding to 32 so that we have a little bit of breathing room. And then what we're going to do is on our section, we are just going to add some top and bottom padding. So we're going to add around, 100 pixels of padding top and bottom. And then what we're going to do is we have to add our text. So within our container, we are going to drop in a div. We're just going to call this hero text wrapper. And you'll see why we're going to put all the text in this wrapper. Actually, we are going to put, just the text for now. We will put this image underneath it. So within here, we want to drop in a heading. And then we want to drop in a paragraph. And then we want to drop in a div. We're going to call this button wrapper. And then within this div, we're going to drop 2 buttons. The first one we are going to call button primary. It's going to auto style it. The second one we're going to call this button second. It's going to auto add the styles. Then we have this little piece of text underneath. We are just going to, with our hero text wrapper selected, we're going to drop in this time a text block. Okay, so what we're going to do is the reason we put all this text inside of a text wrapper is we can add styles to elements within a div without actually styling those elements. So what I mean is, what is one thing that all these elements have in common? Well, they're all aligned to the center. So instead of having to go to each element, align the text to the center, we can do this to all the text at once by selecting our hero text wrapper. We're going to align the text to the center. And then what we're going to do is we are going to set our width to 100%, and we're going to set our max width to, let's do 1000 for now. And you can see it's kind of off to the left-hand side. If you want to align it to the center, all you have to do is in our style panel, click this little button right here beside spacing, and that will align it to the center. In order for this to work though, you have to have a width set. So if you try this ever and it doesn't work, you probably don't have a width set. And then from here, let's go from heading down. So we're going to copy this text. This text is 58 pixels. So we're just going to call this hero h1. We're going to make the size 58 pixels. And then for our line height, we're going to use something called unitless values. So instead of making the line height pixels, because you can see as we scale the text, the line height gets all messed up. If we type in 1 dash and then hit enter, this is a unitless line height. So as we scale the text, the line height stays the same. That's exactly what we want. From here, we can change the line height if we want. So it can be 1.25 or whatever you want. I'm going to paste in the text from our example, our Figma file. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to select our text wrapper, and I'm going to decrease the width to about there so it matches with the text. For the paragraph underneath, I'm going to copy that, paste that in as well. And you can see the text is a little small. So what we're going to do is in our body, again, we're going to select all bodies because we want to make this change to all of the paragraph text. We're going to change the size from 14 pixels to 18 pixels. And again, we are going to do a unitless line height. So let's increase that to about 1.5. Let's do 1.75. There we go. And then from here, let's make our buttons have a little bit of a space between them. That is why we put our buttons inside of this button wrapper. All we have to do is go to our layout settings. We're going to apply flex. We are going to justify it to the center. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to align it to the center. And then our gap, we are going to set our gap. We're just going to slide it here, create a gap in between the buttons. And there we go. And then under here, we have this text here. So we're going to copy it over here in the Figma file. We're going to paste it in. And there we go. However, you can see the spacing between all the elements is a little bit messed up. Not really messed up, but you can see there's more space in between these elements than there are here. So how can we fix that? Well, we can fix it the exact same way we did with putting space between these buttons. All we have to do is select our text wrapper. We're going to apply flex. Instead of it being horizontal though, we want to make it vertical. We're going to align it to the center. And then we are going to increase our gap. And you can see it's increasing the space between all the elements all at one time. So we don't have to go down through and change it for every single piece of text. So the next thing we're going to do is we have this image right here. And all we're going to do is we're going to close our text wrapper. We're going to select our container and we are going to add an image. We're going to choose our image right there. And then this image is going to be full width. So we're just going to call this hero image and we're going to make the width 100%. And we're just going to add a bit of margin on top of it. About, let's do a little bit more. Actually, let's do about 70. And I'm going to decrease the top margin for this section. So there we go. If we hit preview, we already have most of this selected. Now you can see our nav bar is a little bit broken. So what we have to do is go to our nav bar container. And we forgot to do one important step, and that is under spacing. We are just going to select this. And we already did that for our text wrapper, but you can see what that does is it aligns it to the center. And there we go. Our page looks almost identical to our Figma file, and that is a quick overview of how Webflow works. Now you can see in this Figma file there is a lot more that you can go and you can try to build. So I would try to use the principles that you learned in this video to try to build these layouts as well. Again, this Figma file is linked in the description below. You can download it 100% for free.